Hey, listen, welcome to the SharePoint Help Desk. Today I want to talk to you about a Stakeholder Power Grid. Now, this is a concept that's new to me. I've never heard of this before until I saw Justin Batey on LinkedIn post about this. Now, let me tell you something. I am not a project manager, but I am someone who supports project managers. So I follow other project managers and people that put out project management information. Justin Batey on LinkedIn is a powerhouse. The type of information he puts out, the quality of that information and the frequency of that information is really, really, really good. If I was a project manager, I'd be soaking up and using all of his stuff because he just puts it out there. Now, of course, he does a lot of free promotion, but he also has paid products that you can consume. So this Stakeholder Power Grid thing, I learned from him. It was a simple one-pager, and I'm like, oh man, I've already created a stakeholder register. Why not add this to the mix? So what you're going to see in this video is me updating the stakeholder register that I've had before, which you might have seen that video. I'll link to that too. And I'm going to make it a stakeholder power grid. Also, Justin Batey, I'm going to put his link in the description. You need to follow him. I don't know what other platforms he's on, but I know he's on LinkedIn. I'm following him. I'm on there every day, and I'm checking his stuff out. So, all right. I like to dive right in, but let me tell you what this the one pager says. I'm trying to speed through this because I do want to get to the demo. So the first thing that Justin suggests that we do is we list our stakeholders. So we did a stakeholder register in the other video for the characters of the wire. We don't have 20 to 30 stakeholders, but Justin Batey, his first step says to list your stakeholders, and he has like 20 to 30 stakeholders listed. We don't have that many, but it's fine. We'll just do it with how many we have. But he does say begin by identifying a comprehensive list of stakeholders. Aim for a diverse range, including at least 5 to 10 internal stakeholders like employees or departments, and 10 to 20 external stakeholders such as suppliers, customers, regulators, and community groups. All right, now number 2, he says clearly articulate 3 to 5 main objectives for your project. These objectives should be specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time-bound, which, is the acronym SMART. Or you remember it by remembering the acronym SMART. Now, number 3, you evaluate influence and interest. So assess each stakeholder's level of interest in your project, 1 being low and 5 being high, and then their level of influence, 1 being low, 5 being high. Use a consistent scale for comparison. So we're doing interest and influence. All right, now he says create the grid. Draw a grid with the influence on the y-axis, up and down, and interest on the x-axis, across the bottom. And each axis should range from 1 to 5. In other words, from low to high. Now, we're not doing that. Let me pause right here and point this out. So I think I mentioned it in the stakeholder video before, but I'm not focused on the grid per se. I'm focused on helping you do your work. The whole point of the grid is to help you rank your stakeholders and then address them accordingly. So I personally don't look at it like, ooh, we have to create a grid. Not necessarily. What we have to do is group our stakeholders and learn to address them properly. Move out on our strategy. So when we're done here, it's not going to look like a grid. I'm going to just tell you that right off top. It's going to achieve the same goal that a grid can achieve. So just stay with me. All right, now he says plot the stakeholders on the grid. Place each stakeholder in the appropriate quadrant based on their score, interest, and influence. For example, a stakeholder with a 4 in influence and a 5 in interest would be high up on the right side of the grid. Analyze the relationships. He says identify at least 5 key relationships. This is something we're going to do. In other words, we're going to identify who our key stakeholders are. He says identify and document at least 5 key relationships or alliances among stakeholders that could impact your project. Now he says develop engagement strategies for each of the 4 quadrants. So formulate specific engagement strategies for stakeholders in each quadrant. For instance, stakeholders in the high influence, high interest quadrant might require weekly updates and personal meetings, while those in the low influence, low interest quadrant might only need monthly email updates. All right, next he says resource allocation. Allocate a certain amount of hours per week. So allocate a certain number of hours per week for engaging with each stakeholder group. High priority groups might require 5 to 10 hours per week, while lower priority groups might only need 1 to 2 hours. Now it says regular monitoring. You can do monthly or quarterly reviews. So schedule monthly or quarterly reviews to update the grid. Stakeholders' positions may shift as the project progresses. Totally understandable. Lastly, he says communicate and implement. So implement over 1 to 2 weeks. Share the finalized stakeholder power grid with your team and start implementing the engagement strategies. Allocate 1 to 2 weeks for the initial rollout of these strategies. All right. So with all that said, we're going to get cracking and make this happen in SharePoint. All right. Okay. So let's just break down real quick what this grid should look like. Let me give you a quick visual. So on the influence side, we have low influence, high influence, and on the interest side, across the bottom, we have low interest, high interest. So these are the quadrants, and the way we would basically do it is that this is low influence. So, okay, low influence. And this is also low interest. So we'll put both of these in here. These intersect, low for influence and low for interest. They intersect right here. Cool. So what intersects right here? High influence and low interest. So let's get high influence and low interest. Intersecting high, coming up here low. So same thing. Low influence goes here, but then high interest goes here. So low influence, high interest. And then finally, high and high. So we got high influence and high interest. Now let's plot this in our SharePoint list. All right, so we're on our SharePoint site, and it's been a while since I actually looked at this stakeholder register. And I'm looking at it now, and I made an interest and an influence column already, which is what I was coming here to do. So that's cool, but we have medium in there. And while medium works, that's fine. I'm going to remove medium from these columns because I don't want them. So we just go to edit, remove medium, and hit save. And then we go here, column settings, then edit, and then we remove medium. And I'm going to update these. I'm going to edit in grid view so I can edit like a spreadsheet. I'm going to change my two mediums to low and low. And this medium I'm going to change to low. Then exit the grid view. So these are my options. You're either going to have high interest or low interest, and you're going to have high influence or low influence. Now I will actually want, because when we looked at our whiteboard, we had influence first and then we had interest on the bottom, and I just want to see it that way. So now I can set up my views. So if I said, matter of fact, here, let's look at the whiteboard. On our whiteboard, I actually named these sections. Keep informed, manage closely, monitor, and keep satisfied. Because that's the strategic engagement that I'm going to use. You could call yours whatever you want, really. But just for the demo, just to demonstrate this, I'm going to show you how we create these views. So for monitor, it's low influence and low interest. So I'm going to make that real quick. Let's make a monitor view, and we know what monitor means. So the nature of this view makes me want to use the SharePoint Classic view instead of just doing what I would normally do here using the filters. So here's what I would do. I would come over to our view and I would edit the current view, which takes me into this view. So what I want is to come to the filter section, and I'm going to say show items only when the following is true. So first, I want interest to be equal to low, and I want influence to be equal to low. And then I'm going to name this view monitor. I'm going to rename it from all stakeholders. So I'm calling this view monitor. This is the name of the view, and this is the URL of the view. And I'm going to hit OK. So now we have our monitor view. And you can see that influence is low and interest is low. So what I'm going to do is take this URL. I'm going to edit this navigation. I'm going to say under the stakeholder, I want to put the link to that URL, and I'm going to say monitor. Then hit OK. But I'm going to drag it underneath stakeholder register so it indents itself underneath. Then hit save. So now on my stakeholder register, I can click this drop down, hit monitor, and I can see my monitor items. So let's go back to the stakeholder register. Now I'm going to make another one. So first, let's look at the whiteboard. The whiteboard says that keep informed is high influence and low interest. All right, too easy. High influence and low interest. So first I'm going to say create new view, and I'm going to call this keep informed. And I'm going to hit create. Now all the same things here, but what I'm going to do is first I only want to see certain columns. So I'm going to come here and I'm going to say show hide columns. I'm going to get rid of all of these extra columns that I had on here for other demos. You don't need to worry about that. Then hit apply. And again, I like influence being on the left here. So right now all I'm doing is just configuring my view. All right, now after that I want to create this is my keep informed view, but it's not where I need it to be. I need it to be high influence, low interest. So now I'm going to hit this drop down. I'm going to edit the current view, and I come down here to the filter section and I make sure influence is equal to high and interest is equal to low. Those are the items that we want. Now, as you can see, I have influence is high and interest is low. I'm going to grab this URL, hit copy, come over here and edit. Underneath monitor, I'm going to paste this link. Then I'm going to call this keep informed. Then I'm going to say OK, and then hit save. So now on the stakeholder register, I have monitor and I have keep informed. So let me look at my monitor view. My monitor view has low interest, low influence. My keep informed has high influence and low interest. I can keep going, but you get the point. So let me create the other two views and then get right back to you. All right, so I finished creating all of my views. I have a view called Manage Closely, Keep Informed, Keep Satisfied, and Monitor. And we know that that's on point with, our whiteboard and where we put everybody in the grid. And if we click on it and we look at Manage Closely, we'll see these are our high influence, high interest. Keep Informed, we're looking at high influence, low interest. Keep Satisfied, as you saw, is low influence, high interest, but that's not showing up here right now because we don't have anybody in that category. And then when we look at Monitor, that's low influence, low interest, and we see Weebase in there. Now, Justin pointed out some other things that we should do on his one-pager. One of them was to identify key relationships. Now, that's also something else that we're already doing. If you look at this stakeholder type, we can tag somebody as key. So if I was looking at the Manage Closely crew and I wanted to filter to see all of my key, high interest, high influence, I can see it right here. We only got one. I'm gonna clear that off. So inside of every view, we can do that, but we don't even have to do that. If we go back to the main stakeholder register, the list with all of our stakeholders, all 6, we can use the stakeholder type field to identify if they're a key stakeholder, if they're internal, or if they're external. Those were all things that Justin said we should be able to do. So in my basic way, I'm using the same column, stakeholder type, to identify if they're a key stakeholder, internal stakeholder, or external stakeholder. He also said that we need to develop engagement strategies. So remember that? Now we did kind of do that. Our engagement strategy is managed closely for these folks, high influence, high interest. Now that might not be enough for you. So you can actually do something that's a little bit more in depth. So if we look at the home page and we see this link right here, engagement strategies, you can use a SharePoint page to point out the detailed way that you will engage with these kinds of stakeholders. So remember, we have manage closely, keep informed, keep satisfied, and monitor. Those are our 4 groups. So now if I click on manage closely, this view stakeholders button, then we'll get to see that same view. So this is that view that we had made already with the high influence, high interest. If we go back to the home page and we visit engagement strategies again, we can do the same with keep informed. So if I click view stakeholders for keep informed, then same deal. This is our high influence, low interest folks. And those is keep informed, and so on and so forth. So to Justin's point that we need to develop engagement strategies, we can do that. We can, define what those engagement strategies look like, lay them out here on a page, and then you can actually visit those stakeholders and see who falls under what category. He also said that we need to allocate hours per week. So that was another thing, right? So he said that, our highest stakeholders, maybe we do 8 to 10 hours for them, and our lowest stakeholders, we do 1 to 2 hours for them. So same deal. As we look at our manage closely, you might already notice that I added a hours per week column. So if we're doing 2 hours per each stakeholder here, then it sums up to 8 hours on our high influence, high interest folks. So not bad. We're within our 8 to 10 range, and we're good to go. So same thing with if we look at monitor, we got 2 hours on Weebay. Now that might be too much, but at the end of the day, he's the only low interest, low influence stakeholder. So we're good to go there. Justin also said we should be doing regular monitoring. So what I did for that is just added a date column, right? So if we look at the whole full list, we have a stakeholder review date column. I could do it on this view, but let's just go to our manage closely view, right? If we look at our manage closely view and I see these are my very important stakeholders, maybe this is the only place that I want to add a stakeholder review date, because the other ones I'm not super up into what they're doing. They're not high influence, high interest. So I'm going to hit editing grid view, and I'm going to give all of them a date. I'm going to say I'll come back to them in 3 weeks. This project is going for a while, so I'm going to hit all of them. I'm going to give them all the same date, actually, February 8th. And then I'm going to exit the grid view. Now, because of this date, I'm able to set up a reminder on this column. So if I come to automate and I hit set a reminder and I click a stakeholder review date, then I can say, after this works itself, after it does a little bit of magic right here, SharePoint is connected, notifications is connected, Office 365 users connected. Good deal. If I hit continue, I can say review the high let's say HI. That's bad, but I'm just gonna do that. Review the high. All right, maybe high stakeholders, and remind me. Maybe I don't know. 3 days in advance, and then I hit create, and then I'll get an email 3 days before this date that says you need to review this stakeholder and see what's going on. So maybe I don't need 3 days. Maybe I could just get reminded 1 day in advance. Whatever. The point is, you have the option to have a reminder sent to you based on this date. So then that would satisfy where Justin said that we should be doing regular monitoring.